Russia has had countless UFO sightings. Some have been explained, some have yet to be explained. The best known events are the Downogorsk and Tunguska incidents. Many UFO researchers feel that the most important Russian incident in terms of known crash recovered materials is the Downogorsk occurrence. Antonio Honeas agrees.
It's the best documented crash because we do have the fragments. They have been analyzed. It was a small probe. It was not kind of a big object, but something crashed on a hill in Downogorsk in January of 1986.
Witnesses described the object as a sphere of light streaking across the Pacific region north of Vladivostok. Investigators later recovered materials including balls of lead and iron, bits of glass and a fine mesh netting, all of which were tested and are proven to be highly enigmatic. The head of the research team concluded that the Downogorsk object was most likely an artificial space probe of non-terrestrial origin. Russia's best-known event, the Tunguska sighting, is sometimes referred to as the Russian Roswell. In the early hours of June the 30th, 1908, peasants of the Tunguska River area in central Siberia watched in disbelief as a glowing round object with a fiery tail streaked across the morning sky. The object crashed in a remote region of pine forest, exploding in a brilliant ball of flame. Residual firestorms lasted for weeks and destroyed an additional 10,000 kilometers surrounding the crash point. Although the event preceded the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki by nearly 40 years, the aftermath of Tunguska was frighteningly similar to that of the bombings in World War II. The result was the destruction of an area larger than that of Los Angeles or Moscow. Oddly, upon investigation some 20 years later, no impact crater of any kind could be found. Researchers have formed various opinions of what actually happened. The most common beliefs are that it was a meteorite fall, a ball of lightning, or an earthquake. Many have cited that none of these answers are possible and that the phenomenon was more likely the crash of an extraterrestrial craft. It has been speculated that the governments of many countries throughout the world have been gathering information regarding UFOs. Nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman agrees.
There's no question that military and intelligence groups overseas are collecting data, whether it's in Brazil or Australia or in England. So the KGB has collected information. I've talked to people who've gone to the Soviet Union, who have obtained some of that information. I have met a Soviet cosmonaut and other researchers over there. There's no question they're interested. And again, the republics which used to constitute the Soviet Union cover a huge area. They too were monitoring the skies because they were afraid the United States was going to bomb them. So when you monitor the skies, you pick up UFOs, no question about it.
During the communist reign, there was no official admission of Soviet interest in extraterrestrial activity. It has been only recently that this fact has been confirmed. The former secretary of the Commission on Anomalous Phenomena, Alexander Petyukov, confirmed that an official state-controlled body did exist.
В рамках этой комиссии, когда в силу своей деятельности она начала планомерный сбор информации.
During the Soviet era, we started to regularly collect information from the public and received more than 15,000 reports. The thing is that the Commission was an official public organization. It had an official address.
Today, the mindset in Russia is far different from what it was during the communist reign.
Under communism, they were told that UFOs didn't exist, but just the fact that they were told they didn't exist made people believe that they did exist, because the government was also denying. They were saying there was no crime in Russia and accidents didn't happen, you know, I mean, that everything was censored and given this rosy picture, which of course people knew better.
It was in a small house on a side street near the Academy of Medical Sciences. The British and American spies met with informants throughout the 60s and learned are one of the most bizarre plots in the world of intelligence.
During my involvement for a period of at least 6 years, Soviet counterintelligence operatives played cat and mouse with Western agents in Moscow who were interested in our advanced technology programs. Some new weapons and propulsion systems were being developed, and the CIA was using any means to get information from anyone involved with the project.
While I was in Moscow for a year and a half, I had 2 other agents and a guy from the British Secret Service. We routinely debriefed 2 Russian informants who worked for the Ministry of Defense. We would exchange hard currency for information on new military technology. Some of this technology was definitely related to UFOs.
One way we often dealt with such incursions was to feed false information through double agents to give American and British bad leads.
Well, we knew the Soviets were onto something after we started getting all kinds of smokescreen intelligence. That was a sure signal that they were hiding something. It was an indication that they had recovered something near Sverdlovsk. They were keeping it very secret.
Senior research scientist Dr. Richard F. Haynes believes the Soviets had good reason to be interested in UFOs.
It's my understanding that the Soviet military has had a continuing interest in UFO phenomena for very, very many years. And the reason being that their air traffic controllers, their radar sites, their military pilots had been reporting things, just as ours had, and they had no explanation for them. And so the first possible explanation would be that it's a foreign nation test or espionage or something like that of a military nature. And if you're in the military yourself, then you take that very seriously and you explore it.
This film footage certainly seems to depict interest by Russian military personnel in the object that is seen sticking out of the ground. Soldiers, officers, and civilian-clothed agents are deployed around the site, and they appear to be both guarding and examining the object. This is what we found on one of the 4 reels of film obtained in Russia. After viewing the footage, we were able to determine that it was most likely shot with 2 separate cameras. One apparently a handheld camera, which starts out on the approaching truck, and a second one seen here on a tripod. As the soldiers march past, you can see the cameraman turn to follow the troops. Here we cut to the other angle, the point of view from the tripod camera. And here you see the handheld camera as the truck pulls up. Both cameras change vantage points several times during the filming, as if to get better views or perhaps under orders of a superior. From this angle, we see yet more troops arrive. Author Veniamin Vereshchagin describes the event.
Весной же 1969 года рабочий местного совхоза
In the spring of 1969, a collective farmer found some strange remains in the forest not far from Berezovsky
и сообщил об этом,
and reported that to the local security organs,
те в свою очередь
who in their turn asked the neighboring military division of air defense troops, PVO, to provide assistance with the investigation. On March 1969, 2 KGB officers examined the discovery site and sealed it off.
Вы знаете, в дальнейшем события приняли более такой масштабный характер. По просьбе КГБ были привлечены.
On the KGB request, a Soviet army unit was brought to the discovery site,
и в результате уже очень тщательных обследований были найдены.
After close examination of the place, they found some wreckage debris of a disc-shaped object
частично
partially sunken to the ground.
Поначалу органы безопасности предполагали,
At first, the KGB thought that the debris
американскому разведывательному самолету или
came from an American spying plane or a Soviet spaceship.
George Filer, a retired Air Force intelligence officer who was stationed at Langley, is not surprised the Russians were so interested in this object.
we found that the Soviets would pay to get information on UFOs as opposed to, we'll say, an F-111 aircraft, that they were, in a way, more interested in UFOs than some of our latest aircraft.
And here you see the man who is probably the head KGB agent directing the cameraman to point his camera toward the disc. A total of almost 1,200 feet of negative were recovered just on this crash site. It is possible that more film was shot, but this is all that we were able to obtain. None of this film depicts the removal of the disc itself, and at no point do we see inside the object. From this angle, we do see the handheld camera shooting behind or inside the disc. However, that footage, if it was in fact ever shot, was not included in the cans of film we acquired. We can only speculate that it may still be at large. We must also speculate on how the object ended up here. Based on information from Vereshchagin's book and what we can see in this footage, we have created this computer-animated version of how researchers believe the crash may have occurred. The questions then become, where did this object come from and how did it come to crash here? And more importantly, what has happened to it since?
With the change to a market economy here, many items never before available to Russians are finding their way to store shelves. Some point to this as evidence of a new prosperity. Others claim that this only fosters greed, not seen during the Soviet era. They say that everything is for sale in the new Russia, including state secrets and the spies who kept them.
And I'm sure that this happened because I remember in 1991, 1992, there has been a lot of talk about the KGB files. It's quite possible that the files, some of the files, had been sold to the highest bidder.
What is now modern-day Russia was once the core republic of the Soviet Union. Prior to its breakup in 1992, the USSR was the world's largest country, stretching from Eastern Europe into Asia. In addition, the USSR had direct control over the Eastern European countries of Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and East Germany. The boundary of these countries was for years referred to as the Iron Curtain. For decades, its military power influenced events throughout the globe. The single most important event in Russian history was the Revolution of 1917. The Bolsheviks changed the country from a monarchy to the world's first communist state. In the late 1920s, Joseph Stalin transformed the country even more by regimenting every aspect of daily life and still managed to brutally stomp out his opposition. While the USSR was allied with the West during World War II, the years after the war ushered in an era of mistrust that came to be known as the Cold War. This new relationship chilled ever further in August of 1949, when the Soviets exploded their first atomic weapon. The Western powers, including the United States, viewed the USSR as the world's greatest threat. In its ongoing competition with the West, Russia's greatest victory occurred in 1957 under the leadership of Nikita Khrushchev. It was the beginning of the space age. As the first nation into space, it's not surprising that in the years to follow, the Soviets would become increasingly curious about extraterrestrial life existing in our galaxy. Despite their early victory in the space race, back at home, the standard of living and the country's lagging economy weighed heavy on the minds of the Soviet citizens. Under Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev in the 1980s, the terms glasnost and perestroika came to represent a period of humanist reform. The first truly democratic elections in Russia's history occurred in 1991. After 70 years of Soviet rule, the USSR was dissolved. A new market economy has emerged along with more freedom for the people. While there are some who yearn for a return to communism, most citizens feel that the new Russian democracy has been a vast improvement to their daily lives. But with these positive changes come problems. In a recent news survey in Russia, citizens were asked the question, who controls Russia today? An astounding 23% responded the mafia. Renowned Russian writer and Nobel laureate Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote, Russia's economic chaos is the result of merely criminal reforms that have created a new class of mafia capitalists. The word mafia refers to the new system of organized crime in Russia involving countless government officials, businessmen, and organizations controlled by criminal groups. Resistance to extortion attempts has resulted in violence. Kidnappings, assassinations, attacks on family members, or harsh persecution by corrupt government officials have been documented. Dozens of bankers were kidnapped and assassinated by the mafia in the first few years of Russia's independence, when organized crime was taking control over the country's financial system. Having eliminated its rivals in such a brutal manner, the Russian mafia is now in a position of great power. What the future holds for the Russian Republic is uncertain. What is certain is that in the next Russian elections in the year 2000, the interests of big business and those with money will be well represented, and undoubtedly so will organized crime. Mafiocracy, as it has been called, might become the totalitarianism of the new millennium.